Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, welcome back to Ace of Pentacles. In this episode, I chat with Naveen Khan. Naveen is an experienced event manager at a Fortune 100 company and is currently based in Chicago, Illinois. As a native of the Bay Area, she earned her Bachelor of Science degree from San Francisco State University. With over 10 years of experience in the corporate event space, Naveen has specialized in field marketing, large-scale tech conferences, and both B2B and B2C events, with time divided between leading tech companies and startups. Naveen and I worked together about 14 or 15 years ago now. And we worked at a learning center. We were both teaching there. Over the years, I've seen Naveen be very creative in the way that she approaches her career. She is constantly learning, always seeking opportunities to grow, and she's had to deal with quite a bit of uncertainty in her career. I thought it was important to sit down with someone who has dealt with that much uncertainty, especially right now, because of the state of the job market and the economy right now. Naveen has handled the uncertainty very, very well. And as you'll see in our conversation, she's leaned a lot into her ability to learn and be curious in order to do that. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Naveen Khan. Hi, Naveen.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm so happy you're here.
Me too. I've been waiting to be here. I'm excited, especially this conversation.
You know, one of the themes of my podcast is to help people navigate unexpected changes in their careers or uncertainty in their careers. And when I think about uncertainty and
Mhm.
unexpected things happening in people's careers, you're one of my close friends and your career comes to mind. You've had a very interesting career journey since the last time we worked together, which was over, like, I think it was 15 years ago.
Mhm.
I think I was like 10. Um, so, Naveen, let's start here. Tell us a little bit about you. What has your career been like?
Yeah, absolutely. I started off my college career fully prepared to go into healthcare and made a huge pivot from that. I actually did end up doing my major from San Francisco State in public health, fully ready to immerse myself into the healthcare world. And then life had an unexpected turn for me. I ended up getting a job, which I thought was like an admin job, but they asked me for my passport, and I was like, I don't even know if I have one. And I ended up getting my first job as an event coordinator for a small business, a woman-owned business. There were literally less than 50 employees, and I got to do some incredible things, which is like plan international conferences around the world. So it was actually my first time leaving the country with that job and learning a lot of like skills that I never thought I would end up going on that journey. And prior to that, I was teaching. So it was a huge leap from what I had done in college and the skills that I had developed for the job that I had for the 4 years I was in college. But I learned a lot through that job, being exposed to like a lot of big tech companies and learning to work with international vendors and clients. And from there, I was there for about 5 to 6 years. And being in the Bay Area in the Silicon Valley, I was offered an incredible opportunity at Meta, formerly known as Facebook at that time. So I joined them as an event operations coordinator, which was it sounds similar, but it was vastly different than what I had been doing for the previous years. I previously had been an event coordinator. Going to an operational role was, it's kind of like a catch-all, right? So it was everything behind the scenes, kind of enabling us to do what we do when we actually execute an event. So a lot of contracts, working with onboarding vendors, vetting them, creating RFPs, things like that. And so from there, I went from this like really small woman-owned business to working for one of the biggest tech companies in the world, and you can imagine the change of pace that was. At that time, the team I worked for executed 900 events globally within a 365-day calendar year. So it was absolutely insane, and you can imagine that learning curve, learning to work with all different types of people around the world. Um, but I was a contractor at that job, so the uncertainty kind of started there, right? I went from this like full-time job to like a comfortable, cushy job where I knew my bosses. I can have open conversations about what my career looks like to like jumping in as a contractor and being one of like thousands of employees in my campus alone, not just globally. So there I really, I think, benefited from being able to just learn really fast and did that for about 1.5 years and was told, hey, there's no full-time opportunity here. And so that's when I experienced like my first set of what am I doing? Where am I going to go next? Do I still want to be in events? But thankfully, I was able to land a really nice role at a unicorn startup called Poshmark. At that time, they were still a unicorn, and I think they were in their Series C or D funding. And when I had joined, but they hired me to help plan their annual large-scale conferences. I was joining a much smaller team again, but it was much more hands-on. So in big tech, I went from like being one person working on this like multiple large scale events, but doing like siloed work to kind of going to a startup where I had to wear all these different hats, kind of figure out what needed to even be done versus being told like this is what you do and this is how you fit into the piece of puzzle. I had to like kind of create the puzzle, which was interesting. And that's actually where I worked there for about 3 years, and I was able to grow in that role. I got a promotion halfway through, but that was one of the most challenging times because being able to like have that career through the pandemic was an interesting pivot. I think we use that word pivot a lot during the pandemic, right? So the things I learned in that role were like cannot even go into how much I learned during that time. And then from there, I moved states, so it was time for a change, and I to a role at LinkedIn, and that was another big tech company, being kind of going back into like putting my Facebook hat on, but. I was there for a few months before I got another offer for a startup. And that went back to going from big like startup to big tech, then back to startup, where you're working like 13, 14-hour days. You're like figuring out how to make things fit, how to make things keep rolling versus being part of a larger team. And I was there for another few months until my dream opportunity opened up, which was an event manager for a bigger tech company here based in Chicago, and that's where I am now.
Wow. What a story. I mean, there's so many interesting, or I'm just gonna say it, pivots
Yeah.
that I want to dig into. My first question, just based on what you shared, I want to go back to that moment when you were a contractor, at Meta. Is that right?
Mhm.
At Meta,
That's
right?
correct.
What did that feel like? I like how you framed that as like that first moment of uncertainty. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like for you?
Absolutely. Believe it or not, especially in the events world, being a contractor before either being converted full time or not is very common in the Bay Area, but also in like tech, right? Event jobs. So, and I know that exists in other fields like recruiting and marketing, even engineering in some instances. So it can be a double-edged sword. The pros are that you get to step into that role kind of with the ability to kind of go anywhere and do anything based on how you feel about it. So you get to experience, you're doing a trial for yourself, but the company is also doing a trial on you, right? So you get to kind of put up, like, experience that workforce while also observing what's happening around you. Because as a contractor, you should always have your eyes peeled for what other opportunities are available within the company. That is one of the keys to success for being contractor because there is so much uncertainty. But on the opposite side, on the cons, it does lead to that feeling of what's tomorrow looking like? What am I going to do in a year from now? There's usually a time limit on contract work. So um, the thing is that that opportunity is really what you make it. So I use that time to make really, really good connections. And those connections are actually what led me back to my job today. The one that I have today is through a connection that I made back at Facebook. But the gap between those two careers was 6 years. So it really was something that like cashed in later in life. But I really, really utilized my time as a contractor to get to know people at the company. I did those annoying coffee chats with various people's time and asked for their time, picked their brains, got to know them, introduced myself to them. Obviously it's important that you do it in a way where you're balancing your job and you are um, there's some authenticity to it. You're not just putting calendar holds on people's schedules. You have to read the room a little bit. But yeah, that was my first experience of going from like a full-time job to not really knowing what the next year of my life was going to look like.
Naveen, thank you so much for sharing that because I think for folks listening who might be in a moment of transition or, considering moving into the event space, I think it's really helpful context to know that events, recruiting, these are areas where you do it's pretty normal to start off as a
Mhm.
contractor and then move
Mhm.
into a full-time role eventually. So that's really
Mhm.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so then I want to talk about this whole like moving from startup to big tech and startup to like it's like you went back and forth and we know at least I mean I'm familiar with startup work and like working in like an established company, right? It's a very different skill set. Like you mentioned this, it's like going from like 14-hour work days to like, a pretty stable work schedule. And then you're like,
Mhm.
in your case, you're hopping back into those 14-hour work days and work-life balance and you're traveling because you're in events and, there's such high expectations. You're wearing all these different hats as someone who's working in the startup space. What was that experience like for you?
It was a good test of my ability to learn, I would say, because and I don't know if it just worked for me because in a lot of people who work in events just function really well in chaos. So just being able to step between the two, it actually ended up working out really well for me, I would say, because I was never too comfortable. I could never just sit there and say, I have it easy now. I can just, go on autopilot with this job. I know exactly what I'm doing. I was constantly searching for what will make me successful in the role, and it kept me curious, right? So it was a big shift changing between the two jobs, and it did or two types of work. It did require a lot of consideration and am I equipped for this? But anytime I thought I was not equipped for something but took it anyways because I just felt like I couldn't say no to the opportunity, I was surprised by like my own ability to adapt and like I said earlier, read the room and see what's needed, right? That was a really good test and development of my skills is being able to navigate between the two.
Yeah. You mentioned that learning has been kind of your thing, just being open to learning and growing.
Mhm.
What would you say have been some of the most transformative, I guess, experiences, learning opportunities that you feel have really contributed to your career?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, Learning opportunities. Anytime I've been given an opportunity to, let's say, like given a task just because nobody else was able to, like the bandwidth wasn't there for the entirety of the team to do it, and just being able to raise my hand and say, "Hey, I'll do it. I don't know how to do this, but I'll figure it out along the way." I experienced that a lot during the pandemic, during the shift from in-person events to no events to virtual events. Just raising my hand and saying, "Hey, like, I don't know how to do this," and being really honest about it, but I will figure it out. And doing whatever it takes, asking the right questions, I think were transformative experiences in my career. It um, helped me just move forward. So staying hungry, I think, is like the biggest thing and staying a little bit uncomfortable. As much as it gets hard. I know that's like a ideal thing to do early on in your career, but I put myself in those positions like 10, 12 years into my career too, just so it never felt like, okay, I have stopped learning. Does that make sense?
Totally. It sounds like you're not letting yourself get comfortable, which has been really valuable for you.
Yep, exactly.
Um, I remember working with you, and I remember this does not surprise me at all because you're very much the type of person that like raises your hand and is like volunteering to do that extra work, to do, to do that stretch project. And I think that's a really impactful way to grow. I think there's a lot of people that will like go out and look for these, courses that they can take or like certifications and and that's all great because that's theoretical learning and it's
Hmm.
wonderful, right? Being in a classroom setting and, learning a skill set in theory. But I still believe that the most learning you do is actually in practice. It's when you raise your hand for those opportunities that you think are outside of your reach, you think, you don't have the skill set for, and then you grow into it.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I remember working with you and seeing you do that. I remember you were working the one of like five jobs that you were when I worked with you at Learning Bee. You're like, one day I think I'm gonna like work on this curriculum and become a teacher. And that was what, like you said 16 years ago, and now
Mhm.
you 10 years later you were a teacher. You did it. So I definitely learned a lot of that from you in the years that we worked together.
Yeah. I want to talk about COVID.
Hmm.
So I immediately thought of you when I thought about like talking about uncertainty and navigating the
Hmm.
unexpected for this reason primarily. I remember us after, things started opening back up. It may have
Hmm.
been, 2021, I don't remember, but I remember us going to brunch with a couple of coworkers and we were all kind of sharing our COVID stories, right?
Yeah.
And you were like, guys, I know you're all stressed out, but try being an event planner during COVID.
I remember that. September of 2020. I remember that.
Oh, okay, I did not remember the date, but yes, I still think of that. And one of our old coworkers and I, when we hang out, we still remember that moment when you said that. And we just
Oh my God.
so Naveen, being an event planner during COVID, tell us
Mhm.
what that was like.
Oh my God. Clearly, I remember the date because I was very traumatized at that time. No, COVID was really interesting. I think it was even more transformative than like taking on these like contractor roles in terms of uncertainty for obvious reasons. I remember feeling like I was so confused on how an events job, like events are in person. At that time, it was primarily in person. How does an events job work when you can't have events? I remember just being really, really afraid. I think that was one of the first times where I was truly afraid in my career, being in the Silicon Valley. There was no shortage of opportunities, but at that time, it felt like it didn't matter where you were, it would have, the opportunities were limited everywhere and for everyone. Of course, that changed course a couple months later, but in the beginning, March 2020 was tough. I remember we had to, our manager, she really fought for us to have a purpose and role at the company that I was at the startup, and we had to write down ways in which we could use our roles to benefit the company. We had to brainstorm. We were in planning sessions coming up with these ideas. And sorry, I cannot tell you how far you reach to be able to come up with a way to connect yourself to what's happening in the world in moments like that. And some really incredible things came from that actually, because again, being the most uncomfortable was when with that team, we ended up doing some of our best work because the root of what events are, like my experience was. realizing that events are about connection, and connection, whichever way you foster that, that's what it all boils down to, right? So maybe you won't have in-person connection. I am a strong believer that in-person is the best way to connect with folks, but like at that time, we couldn't even fathom how you would, of course, you connect online when you're chatting with people, but it's a whole different thing to create a community that you do for in-person events virtually and really push for that consistently. Um, and that's what we did. We came up with all sorts of ideas. I was not the only person on that team, but the way we brainstormed and kind of output ideas was coming up with weekly coffee chat ideas that we would lead. That's still planning an event, right? Realizing that you can connect those dots and kind of transform it into something. We went from doing a in-person conference that had like 50 to 60 breakouts through the week. We found a way to do that on Zoom. This was prior to Zoom coming out with all the capabilities they have now. This is early pandemic, but really connecting with Zoom representatives, or I remember we reached out to like 30 different like online platforms to understand what financially would be the lowest impact for the company, but foster the most connection and do what we needed it to do. And of course, it ended up being Zoom, but we spent a lot of time like researching, putting together notes, um, understanding how this would work. And then I slowly went from like being an events person to turning into like almost an AV person. Mind you, I work with AV people daily. They do a million more things than what I was doing during the pandemic. But I was in like GitHub forums trying to figure out how to make my online studio connect and get the correct capabilities to do like closed captioning for people who needed those, like that. Those are things that we would hire people for before, and I was like trying to learn how to do it with myself with any free platform we had available that would make the most financial sense for the company. So it was coming up with all these ideas and solutions and seeing what we executed. I remember there was one month where we did about like 50 different virtual events alone, between like weekend events and evening events, and it was all from home. So it was a very transformative, uncomfortable, and like uncertain time for event planners alone, but it ended up creating something that was so fruitful for the company I was working for.
Wow. Yeah, that's not my first thought is like that sounds really stressful. I I as someone who is very curious about like human behavior and I'm an observer of human behavior
Mhm.
and it surprises me and it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that your job at that time, part of it was to basically show the company your worth in some ways.
Mhm.
The reason why it's not surprising is because we live in this world where like companies have to make money and if
Right,
they're if COVID happens, if like there's a lockdown and people can't be in person together, then like why do we need event planners, right? So
right.
I understand it from that perspective, but I also am surprised from the perspective of, and now, I mean, obviously looking back after COVID, hindsight's 2020. I
Mhm.
think that was one of the most important times to be an event
Mhm.
planner and be able to figure out how to help people connect in a world that
Mhm.
felt very lonely and isolated and disconnected.
Absolutely. It ended up serving a need that it didn't start off that way, right? We were like, 2 months we'll be at home, we'll go back.
Yeah.
And I remember when we canceled the hotel where we had the conference happening in a few months, that's when things got real. Like, oh my God, things are not going to be the same as they were. We're not out of here in 2 months. And then, yeah, finding a way to connect that void that people were feeling with something that didn't function in a way like you said, people need connection, and just finding a way to like turn events upside their head and
Hmm.
bring them virtually and still calling it an event and learning all these skills. It was an interesting time to like make all of that fit together.
Yeah. Yeah. Naveen, looking back at that time in your life, how did that experience shape your career?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I are on most about when asked this is literally the staying curious part, because if I didn't have the ability to continue to learn and just be curious about what's happening in the world, what other companies are doing, what other people in my role are doing, in what ways people are adapting, I think it I would have lost that piece if I hadn't gone through that, because I think I've been working in this field long enough where, I kind of knew how things went. I'd done enough types of events where you kind of know anything that goes, or somebody who knows or who would be able to help you. But in that moment, it was a huge reminder of why staying curious is very, very beneficial. Being able to observe and ask the right questions and ask maybe challenging questions of why you don't think things will work. That's something that, like, I use as a skill even now, even though we're out of the pandemic, right? I see myself day to day being, maybe not every day, I'm not going to give myself so much credit, but like in situations where there's like challenges or something unexpected comes across my desk, I'll go back to kind of doing more research than I maybe would have before coming up with the solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Just being really diligent and thorough in the way that you're approaching a problem, it seems, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Naveen, I know you're someone who looks to kind of expand your skill set and take on new challenges. And I think sometimes when we're faced with the unexpected and there's uncertainty, it's almost like we're grasping for like those straws. We're like, what else can I do? How do I control this, right? Like, how do I control this
Mhm.
outcome? Is there anything you did that you feel like you look back at now and you're like, wow, that was kind of silly that I went that far thinking something was going to happen when I really didn't need to go there?
Right. You're asking the perfect person that question because of how much anxiety I have, and you happen to know that. Um, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when I was making those lists, kind of trying to find a way to utilize my role um, at the company I was at. Concurrently, I'd signed up for an MBA or GMAT class to get my MBA. I also signed up for, joined a bunch of Reddit forums and started taking online classes on getting my engineering degree, while also trying to do trying to, continue being an event planner who's trying to find a way to do all these things with virtual events. So I can tell you all the things not to do from experience versus what to do. Yeah, I definitely wanted like a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I tried really hard for that. But I think that a lot of the things that I did was to just really ease my own mind when I thought of like the uncertainty when it came to my work. But to be honest, I wouldn't say that was exactly a waste of time, because, following along this theme of just like staying curious, I kind of through I never ended up getting my MBA, and I am not currently an engineer, but through those like experiences, I was able to talk to new people, learn new things, and understand like this is what this industry is going through. These are what people in that industry are doing to help themselves, right? Through that, I learned, I think you're the one who actually told me that most people end up going back to school when faced with like a recession, and or like when there's like something like a global pandemic, who knows when that will happen again. But a lot of people end up going back to school. So learning little tidbits like that really um helped me understand just generally how the world works, but also like what I would do in the future if something like this were to happen. I know the resources I would go to when I felt like I do want to make a career change, when I am ready for something new. Maybe I just got really good at math overnight and I'm like, I'm ready to learn that computer science stuff. Um, it really, I don't think it was a deficit to me. If anything, it was just a benefit, being able to understand like what else is out there in the world.
Yeah. I'm just imagining what it would be like to talk to Naveen the engineer right now.
Believe me, I wish you were. 5 years ago, I wish you were.
Hey, that's how long it takes to get that computer science degree.
I know. Can you imagine?
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah. No, I think that's a very common experience, and I
Mhm.
don't I don't think it's just you. I think we all go through that. There's a reason why so many people choose to go back to school during moments of uncertainty, right?
Right.
The economy, a recession, people losing their jobs, job market's bad. You go back to school to build a new skill set, to learn
Mhm.
new skills, to develop and to be able to market yourself differently. And so that's a very common reaction, which is why I asked that question, not because I know you.
It might have been a little bit of both.
Okay, fine. It was like a little bit of a. Oh man. Naveen, thank you so much for sharing your experience. As we wrap up,
Mhm.
I'm curious what's some of your best advice for someone who's dealing with uncertainty in their career in any way
Mhm.
right now?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's something a lot of people are facing right now, right? With
Mhm.
everything happening in the world. Um, I think one of the most important things I would say is based on the resources you have, whether you're in a current job or you have certain connections, do your best to get to know what's happening around you, have conversations, have authentic conversations, right? Like meet people where they are, let them know why you're reaching out to them and what you're really curious about. I think a lot of people in theory are okay with networking, but when it actually comes down to it, it's harder, right? So you'd be surprised at how much people want to help others. So definitely observe what's happening around you, talk to people. The second is educate yourself on like what you are capable of, whether you're taking like different classes to understand what you like or you don't like, what you're interested in. Let's say you want to make a career change, you want to go to something that's fully remote, you're having an in-office job, things like that. All of these things, it doesn't have to be a great recession that causes us to evaluate these things. It could just be a life change that your interests have shifted, and you will always benefit from like knowledge is power. You'll always benefit from doing the best you can with what's happening around you and educating yourself. And then the last, I think I keep saying this, is just staying curious. Just ask questions. Don't accept things for the way they are, right? Like ask why does this role exist? What else can it be doing? And if you're in a startup, those questions are very welcome and you could transform that into something bigger. So I think that's something that I would offer to somebody who's like not sure of what tomorrow's looking like, is being able to ask those questions and observe the world around you critically in order to make the most of it.
Yeah. I think the common thread in all of your wonderful advice that you just shared is the sense of empowerment. I love how you
Mhm.
said, you don't have to wait until there's a recession or that you lose your job or like an external thing happens to put you in a situation where you're navigating uncertainty. You can actually
Exactly.
make that decision. You can put yourself in a situation where you have to navigate change, you have to navigate uncertainty because you choose to do that because you're ready for something new, something bigger, or something different.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That might be the Sagittarius in me speaking, but
Oh, Naveen, one thing you said that I think is really interesting and very relevant, and I want to get your opinion on this, is,
Mhm.
this whole idea of like staying hungry and like going after things and taking the big projects that you might not be, they might not be part of your job description. I feel
Mhm.
like we're like in this moment right now where everyone or a lot of people are very much like, oh, if I have to take on extra work, I have to get paid for it, right? And I don't disagree with that necessarily, but I know from my own experience, every time I've taken on the project that nobody else wants or like the extra work that nobody else wants to do, the person who's probably benefited from it the most is me. And so I want to ask, what do I want to ask? How do I want to ask this? Like what are your feelings about this mindset right now of like I'm not going to do extra work beyond my job.
Yeah, the realist in me is very much like, yeah, F the man, right? You're like a cog in the wheel, like.
Yeah.
I want to do my own thing. You should, but I guarantee you that extra step you took, those extra, I'm not saying work 10 hours extra
Mhm.
after you clock out at 5, but between 9 to 5, make those fruitful, make those useful, make them beneficial to you. Because if it's beneficial to the company and you're taking some extra steps to get something done, you will have learned something from it. If you're at a point where you're not learning, that's a bigger conversation to have, right? Maybe it's time for you to get a new job, or maybe it's time for you to explore a new opportunity or a new role. But if you are making that time that you do have to be at work as useful as possible, you will benefit from it in the long run. I think earlier you and I talked about that, or I mentioned that curriculum you told me you were working on like 16 years ago. And that's something that you use to literally start your own company.
Yeah.
It comes back in ways that you do not expect. Clock out at 5 and go rant about whatever it is you want to rant about in private. I'm not saying drink the Kool-Aid and, be that like corporate guy 24/7, but when you're in the job, like put your full self into it in order to benefit yourself too. I think that is a little bit lost sometimes with whoever thinks the way that you mentioned is that like, oh, I'm only going to do the bare minimum. I'm only going to do what I'm paid to. Sure, but like you're also going to get the bare minimum out of that experience, and it's just going to reinforce your belief that you're not going to get the experience you wanted and you'll be unsatisfied, and it's going to be a perpetual cycle. So I think do yourself a service by really immersing yourself and putting your best foot forward in the time that you do have to clock in with the man. Like just do it.
Yeah.
It'll help you.
Yeah. I love how you said that. It's like you don't know when it's going to pay off, right? Like if
Mhm.
you look at every opportunity that you get at work, especially the stuff that nobody else wants to do,
Yeah.
will 100% pay off. It's a skill set that you're building. It's,
Yeah.
it's knowledge, it's experience, it's stuff that you get to like put on your resume. It's stuff that's going to help you. Like I hate being the person that says this, but like if you're not getting promoted and you're not getting a raise, but you took on that really hard project last year, the company down the street is going to pay you 20% more to come work for them
Oh
because
yeah.
you were able to do that. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
it makes you such a marketable candidate. And I think a lot of people right now, especially, have this mindset of, like to your point, just do the bare minimum, just clock out. It doesn't matter. I'm going to disengage from work and, I'm going to not care about work. And once again, I am not saying like drink the Kool-Aid or whatever, but like do what's best for you and keep your long-term goals in mind.
Absolutely. I don't know if I like it's even appropriate to say this, but drink the Kool-Aid or pretend to drink the Kool-Aid between the time that you have to and then stop. Of course, if you have people who are like, it's an opportunity where they're no longer learning and they are frustrated by the fact that they have to keep doing these extra projects and it's things they've done before, then reevaluate what you're doing, right? Like reevaluate other opportunities that would help you get to where you do want to be. So you want to stop. I understand that everything we're saying sounds very idealized, but in some way or another, it always ends up coming back to you
Absolutely.
eventually.
I mean, I built an entire coaching practice based on the extra work that I took on at all these
Mhm.
companies that I worked at for a long time,
Yes.
where I was working really hard, and all my friends would be
Mhm.
like, "Oh my gosh, you work so much, you work so much." But like, I mean, I was 38 years old when I was like, "All right, bye corporate America, at least for now, right?" Might
And
come
now you're your own boss.
might come back, but I was just like, I need a change. I need to do something different. I need to, as hard as I was working for everyone else, I came to a moment where I was like, what if I worked that hard for myself, right? And then I
Yeah.
realized all those years of working so hard for someone else, it did actually end up being for myself.
Yeah. So I know Saturday night you were texting me about your work and what this podcast was going to look like, but what'd you do on Monday?
I mean, it was like 80 degrees, okay? Like it hasn't been that nice outside in a long time, Naveen. So, I mean, like, yeah, I was sitting by the pool, okay? Like,
The
whatever.
benefits of being your own boss, right?
Yeah,
But
but
yeah, you like we all saw the journey you took. How many times did me and like whenever we were hanging out, we would like make fun of you for working like 5 jobs just because you wanted to, and like it all paid off for you, right? And I think that's the benefit is like replace corporate America with whatever it is you're working on, but really putting your full self into what you're doing and putting 100% effort or like even 90% effort, only you will benefit from that. In whatever, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an accountant, whatever it is, you will benefit from actually putting good work in versus just clocking in and out.